gaslighting us, like going back to this Sigmund Freud
Pretending
technique.
he doesn't know.
Pretending
Pretending
you
he
don't
doesn't
know
why this
why
matters.
we're upset. You fully know why we're upset. You fully know why this matters. In fact, it was your administration, people that you've now put in your administration, who have communicated the importance of Jeffrey Epstein.
Candace Owens recently dropped the hammer on the Trump administration for covering up the Epstein story, and on Trump himself for betraying us all, gaslighting us, trying to pivot away from this issue to cover others. And she really gets into the implications of this. Will his base survive and continue to be loyal? Will this jeopardize some of his future policies and agenda? This is in the context of a conversation with Milo Yiannopoulos. So let's get their take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
I genuinely am trying to process what's happening with this administration. Obviously, this is Israel. We have been infiltrated by Israel. I'm wondering if maybe we were always infiltrated by Israel and we just weren't paying attention. But the first remarkable fumble, and this was shocking to me because Trump, generally speaking, has good social skills and is able to read a room correctly. I would say that, right? For him to come out and say, why are we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
And if you're still on it, I don't want you as supporters.
That I just go, is somebody tweeting for him? Do they have something on him? Is he actually sweating bullets? Because the Trump that I know is smarter than to try to gaslight his supporters. So what is your read on that when he did that?
When he said, so here's the thing. The grand, pedo theory or whatever, this idea that there are elites wielding extraordinary power in the shadows, using evidence against each other of whatever, who have this is not a conspiracy theory. This is how every civilization in human history has become at the late decadent period, just before things collapse. It is not unusual or crazy or right-wing or lunatic to say, I kind of think there might be a secret cabal of powerful pedophiles running the world. That's exactly what happens in every empire in history. It's what happened in Rome. It happens in all of them. So it isn't weird or strange that people would imagine that might be happening now, as our civilization looks as though it may be crumbling.
Yeah, interesting take there. Certainly this is not a case where Trump read the room well. He certainly didn't practice good social skills on this, especially because of how defensive he was in covering this up and saying, yeah, you're basically just fake supporters now. You're basically like the Democrats buying into Russiagate if you still want answers on the Epstein thing, despite the fact that it was me, Trump, the guy who appointed some of these people like Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi that made quasi-political careers out of talking about how we need transparency in the Epstein case. It's certainly a slap in the face to a lot of his base and clearly doing damage, and you can tell how they're responding to it in a way that they're actually trying to pivot and they know the damage has been done. Is it too little, too late? I guess we'll have to see about that, but certainly this is hurting him. All polls indicate that. And they did try to invoke what was a red herring, the grand jury testimony, which even if that did work, it would have been redacted and probably taken months. Of course, that was shut down. Here, while we're sitting on actual evidence that they do have, like the wire transfers that they have from Epstein to prominent people locked away with, the key shoved under a rug somewhere of $1.5 billion in transfers that Wyden has seen, Ron Wyden, and wanted to have released, but we're not going to get that.
It's just not weird to think that. It was also a central plank of MAGA. It's why 2016 happened. It's one of the 3 or 4 things that made 2016 happen. This idea that the Democrats in particular, although probably we didn't want to know too much, but or maybe we did, but probably some people on our side too. But mostly the Democrats, celebrities, politicians, all the rest of it, were in cahoots with people like Jeffrey Epstein, doing backdoor deals, not passing laws or not running institutions for the people, but rather for their own enrichment, engorgement, and power. And they all also happen to be wrapped up, if not in outright pedophilia, at least in sexual degeneracy and so on and so forth. And this is kind of a rump of people at the top of society, the elites, who live basically beyond consequence, who live free from worry about the terrible things they do, things that would end the life of anybody else, because they are insulated by this, by the world in which they live and everybody looking out for everybody.
Yeah, indeed. I generally agree with them on this, a two-tier justice system. And remember when they arraigned and charged Trump in various states and tried to take him off the ballot in 2024? They said, hey, this proves no one's above the law. But just think of how much of a farce that is when you see the cover-up that was bipartisan, both the Biden administration and Trump administration covering up for Epstein. He's exactly right about that. These people live in a universe in which their interests and their secrets are always out of the sight of the public, despite when they campaign on transparency. He's right about that too. I mean, Epstein, in many ways, this story was symbolic of the whole populist movement behind Trump, saying that, you know, there's elites and the rest of us, and we want to get to the bottom of their secrets and drain the swamp. Hey, there's, you know, a lot of elites in power. They've, you know, done us dirty over so many years, and we need to drain the swamp and the bureaucracy and the cover-ups. But that's exactly what Trump hasn't done. Quite to the contrary, not only hasn't he done that, but he's, you know, pretended you're an idiot for thinking that he ever would after he talked about that endlessly.
That strikes me as a demonstrable fact of reality and not necessarily anything too great. So this is a plank along with the border and a few other things, free speech, that become the motivating social energies behind 2016. Why it happens, right? Why Trump is possible at that moment. Why people are open to voting for somebody so unusual in politics. Why people were prepared to take the risk. Epstein is the key that unlocks the secrets, the secret architecture of our world.
Yeah, totally agree with him on this. Actually, Glenn Greenwald's called the Epstein story, or this client list, or, you know, the Epstein files, a Rosetta Stone that will decode the evil criminality in the deep state, in the state that revolves around the legal community, the lobby community, the political community, that was all swirling around Epstein and his associations with intelligence agencies and sex trafficking operations, which likely were linked to the intelligence operations because, you know, what is more powerful to a foreign government than that kind of leverage over prominent people and bending them to your will?
The way in which power is structured and operates over all of us, and over and for its own benefit, and for the enrichment and engorgement and protection of a couple of people. He represents in one person everything that we worry about, that we fear, that we strongly suspect is happening, and that we're probably right about. He's a symbol for all of it. And it's for Donald Trump, who we had previously assumed was somebody who just got us when nobody else did, to turn around and say, I don't understand why people are going on about this. I think it's just bad people, my former supporters. If you're into this, I don't want your support.
Oh.
When I heard that, my response was very simple. Okay.
Yeah, mine was a bit more
More expletive.
I just was like, I said this to Tucker Carlson a few days ago. I would have preferred you saying, F you. Nana boo boo, you can't touch us. We have so much power. Because then I would have appreciated
At least
the
be
honesty.
mad. At least be mad.
Yeah, in a way, I guess that would be easier to swallow if they were actually just honest for once, rather than saying, oh, there actually is no Epstein files. There's no evidence of blackmail. He didn't have any clients. There's, the hours of footage was actually child porn and not Epstein molesting children, as Pam Bondi put it earlier than that. And, oh, by the way, here's this video with 3 minutes cut out of it that doesn't even show near to Epstein's cell to prove definitively that he actually killed himself. The whole thing was absurd. The fact that they thought people would buy this narrative is probably the most absurd thing about it, is that this would placate the skepticism that we've all had about Epstein and everything that swirls around this, from, how he accumulated so much wealth to, his odd and ambiguous death that they tried to cover up right away. Bill Barr, who was the son of Donald Barr, who hired Epstein for his first job teaching at the Dalton School, tried to sweep under the rug as soon as possible to not make it seem like there was anything odd about his death, even though there clearly was. to the connections that he has to foreign intelligence, which are plentiful and many sleuths have taken little time to uncover, but they never talk about that in the edifice of the swamp in Washington, D.C.
I would appreciate the honesty, but gaslighting us, like going back to this Sigmund Freud
Pretending
technique,
he doesn't know.
Pretending
Pretending
you
he doesn't know why this
why
matters.
we're upset. You fully know why we're upset. You fully know why this matters. In fact, it was your administration, people that you've now put in your administration, who have communicated the importance of Jeffrey Epstein. Whether we're talking about
you did it.
You did it. Your sons did it. And so there was just this moment where I wasn't just frustrated, I was angry. I was actually angry. And then the stupidity, which is required for supporters to believe when Pam Bondi then looks over and says, we don't know if he was working.
Come off it, love.
Wouldn't you rather than they just say F you? I would prefer that.
Yes, you're right.
It's more respectful to just say F you.
It is. And at least with F you can say, well, there must be a lot going on. I'll talk to you when you've calmed down. At least there's an opportunity to circle back.
And the way they've dealt with this has only compounded the idea and theories that, hey, Trump was in on this, powerful Republicans were in on this, people from the other side were in on this because Biden did the same thing. But, Clinton is in on this because both he and Trump were friends with Epstein. It's only raised new questions and compounded the skepticism people have and, circumstantial evidence that these players in charge of the levers were involved in this whole thing. That's been the result of this. They couldn't have acted more bad when it comes to, allowing those theories to grow and fester and foment than if they would have handled this any other way, including, like she said, just saying F you.
And to forgive. And to assume that something must be, it's like, you're going through a lot, something. Give us something to cling to, but no, cold, calculated, repeated. I don't want you. Okay. This was a betrayal, not just of his supporters, their priorities, and his own promises, but it was an attempt to deny one of the reasons that he got elected in the first place, and pretend that it didn't exist. And this is a level of lie, a level of audacity that is so disrespectful and so outrageous and so extraordinary that it leaves you wondering, all right, what have they got on you? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't enough that they just, denied divulging this information. They pretended that you were stupid for still wanting it. You were called a former supporter. I was never a supporter of him, but many people did support him because of transparency and issues like this. And they just said, oh, hey, Trump didn't actually talk about this that much during his campaign. Well, he did quite a bit with Lex Friedman and some other podcasts. But you're right. I guess he didn't talk about it that much, but many of his subordinates did. And those subordinates, him knowing that they did when considering them for high office, including cabinet positions in two of those cases, Bondi and Patel that I talked about earlier, decided to elevate them regardless of that.
There was something about the gaslighting, too, that for me felt very academic. And what I mean by that is just in my life and my experience, you find these people who believe so much in their degrees, right? We rule over you because I have a master's degree in this and I'm smarter than you.
Blind faith of credentialism.
Yes, credentialism, without question. And I will tell you right now, the blue collar people are smarter than them. Okay, these people would die if they had to go out and hitch a tent in the forest. Literally, they wouldn't be able to survive on basic skills,
or even do a middle class job, be a travel agent. They wouldn't be able to
do any of the stuff, right? Common sense is so much more admirable. And when he said that, he basically looked at people who have common sense, right? Who recognize what's happening. They maybe don't hold the degrees of your ilk, people that graduate to from UPenn and their sons go to UPenn. But they know what Jeffrey Epstein is, and they know what Jeffrey Epstein was. Yep. And so he lost...
And they know he didn't kill himself,
They know he didn't kill himself. And so he lost something that was almost magical about him. Again, like the ability to be a person that comes from this class of people, but to be able to speak to the blue-collar worker, to the middle class.
Well, she has more lofty perceptions of him than I ever did, but it's undeniable that he did speak to a class that felt kind of disenfranchised, dismissed, overlooked, and, underappreciated. That's for sure, regardless of whether you like Trump or not. But that is true. She just highlighted in that True Social post, you're a Democratic weakling, or a weakling doing the business of the Democrats by still wanting answers about things that you were promised to get answers about. Well, the answers they gave us were in the form of fraudulent binders full of docs that had already been released in that absurd spectacle that was at the White House, I think in February, when Pam Bondi passed around to conservative influencers those binders with nothing burger, total humiliation. I don't even see that these people got on the same page about how to, carry this narrative forward. If there was any point that they were actually going to divulge some of this information, they weren't on the same page, and it's total humiliation for them.
He lost that. He suddenly became one of them in that moment.
I agree. And in a sense, he took a steaming pile of, on his legacy, on his supporters, and on the underpinning assumptions that he was voted in office on the basis of.
But I want to ask you, Trump, Epstein files, he's obviously in them. We've determined that he's in them in some capacity. That was the reason for the gaslighting. Apparently they had this meeting. Trump did not deny this. And Pam Bondi said, you're in the files. It's been a
complicated relationship, right? Because we know that Epstein was afraid of Trump and thought that Trump was going to cause a lot of problems for him. And some people say that's because Trump is a Fed, of course he is now as a president, but that he was maybe was helping the authorities with Epstein. So it's been complicated, hasn't it, with them?
Yeah, it's been complicated, but it is interesting that Trump didn't know allegedly until May that he was in the files. He knew.
I don't believe that, by the way. I don't believe that if you were president of the United States when the investigation began and you were friends with Epstein for it seems like about 15 years. It looks like all signs lead me to believe that that relationship was broken up by about 2004 because of a real estate deal gone wrong. There's other, people that say, hey, there was, him picking off employees from Mar-a-Lago and that causing a dispute. But it was around that time that their relationship was severed. So with those two things in mind, that you don't think your name would even come up in the Epstein files and anything related to the Epstein investigation that the feds had, I don't really believe that. I mean, that could be a reason that he is reacting the way he is, regardless of, any kind of implications of criminal activity or activity charged or connected with Epstein's crimes. But I don't believe he didn't think that, he was just shocked that his name didn't come up. I think Clinton's name would come up. And again, I think this is a little bit of a red herring. The names will appear, but whether there's any information, actionable or otherwise, indicating that they were involved in crimes, I don't really think it's that relevant. And it's going to be the red meat for people to talk about, maybe even podcasts and, videos and content creators like me. But, I do think that's a red herring. We need to see the evidence to conclude what was done wrong, who was implicated, which intelligence services were involved, etc.
Knew obviously that he had been on the planes.
I mean, you knew we were there, so you knew you'd be in the files.
Right. Well, he wasn't on the island, but right. What do you think? There are people that are watching this and they say, Candace, you're so stupid. Like, obviously Trump's been involved in stuff that's no good. I actually truly do not believe that Trump is into children, which some people have alleged.
No.
What
no
do you
evidence
think
of that.
it is
No
that he's
suggestion
hiding,
of that.
though? Because he suddenly doesn't want people talking about the files. So what is that about?
Evidently, the operation around Epstein is protecting the same people who are currently shilling for Israel in the Middle East, and who have done so much to destroy and impoverish and weaken and cripple and corrupt this country.
Yeah, amen. I think that's the surest sign based on the circumstantial evidence involved. But of course, we'll never know. We can say, like, I don't think Trump was implicated in crimes, or I don't think Clinton was implicated in crimes. Alan Dershowitz, even though he said, hey, I kept my underwear on during those massages, if he was involved in anything more than that, who knows? I think there were a lot of high-ranking people involved in a lot of vile things surrounding Epstein for sure, but we'll never know. But again, Trump has handled this in a way that people can only speculate or throw out the theories that he was involved because of how this cover-up is going. That's the problem. We need to see the files. If you want to dispel those things and you're not involved, that's the only way to do it. Until then, people are always going to speculate on that, and it'll keep growing and growing, just like JFK assassination theories went. Exactly like that. I think this is, in many ways, this generation's JFK.
You know, we need to know. We need to see the files because we have to know that we were right. We have to know that we tore up the norms of politics to elect somebody wacky. We loved him, but he's wacky. And took that huge risk and will be punished for it. I mean, you can only imagine what's going to happen next time the Democrats get in. We have to know that we did it and that we were right.
Here's what I think will happen next time the Democrats get in. Exactly the same things that are happening today. We'll get into more endless wars. You know, the top tier of the income tax will still be like something like 39%. It might be, you know, above by 2% or something like that. We'll still have lots of corporate welfare. The military industrial complex will be here. The Israel lobby will be here. Big pharma, big food, big tech. Tons of corporate welfare, tons of wealth transfers from the middle class to those big corporations, and it will be about the same.
We have to know that there really were people doing this stuff. And everything that you see suggests that that's the case. The Diddy trial, for instance, was clearly about getting the tapes that incriminated powerful Democrats. And after they had those tapes, James Comey's daughter, the prosecutor, Maureen, they lost interest in whether Diddy was even guilty or not. The prosecution themselves asked for the judge to take charges off immediately before the jury goes to deliberate because they know they didn't even get close to proving that stuff. And so he gets convicted of a couple of the minor charges, you know. I mean, the guy might well be a real piece of work. And most people assume in the business that he is. If so, why didn't the government prove it? Because the Department of Justice had no interest in finding out whether or not he was raping and drugging people. All they wanted was the tapes so that the powerful people on them weren't in any danger.
I actually, yeah, they wanted the tapes that apparently he had tapes that they didn't know about, but he was a total operation. I think Kanye told the truth about that.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think it's probably the full extent of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. But you know, these ops do go rogue, and if he had tapes that they didn't know, whatever.
He did. He had extra tapes that they didn't know about, and they wanted to get their hands on them.
Right. So they go and get them back, and then they kind of, you know, phone in the rest of the trial, which is maybe their thank you for being such a good operative, you know, phoning in the rest of the trial. And you know, frankly, the job that the Justice Department did, he should probably get a pardon because he did get justice. He did not get a fair trial. Anyway, point being, that whole spectacle, that whole embarrassing collapse of justice there. Another example of how even now these actors can put their finger on the scale and make things happen when they need to. Why is Trump doing this? What they got on him? First of all, I think you're right about Miriam Adelson. I think it was the cost of being president again. Is when the call comes and the bill falls due. That's what you got to do.
There seems like it, based on his cabinet appointments, the types of policies that he's run cover for, the types of policies he's endorsed, and trying to plead with Israel's legislature, the Knesset, to drop all corruption charges with him, bankrolling the genocide in Gaza, which, by the way, Netanyahu said, we are occupying Gaza. It's in the name of Greater Israel. People talked about this forever. People said, no, that's just a conspiracy. They're not going to do it. Well, Netanyahu said the decision's been made. You know, Trump joining in with Netanyahu and Israel to try to, you know, put regime change on the table versus Iran in the 12-day war, which they're celebrating as a triumphant success, but it's only because of Iranian restraint that didn't go farther, that Iran tipped the U.S. off to its attack. It's an Israel first mentality, and a lot of it is because of the Adelsons, most recently Miriam Adelson, who did give Trump $100 million, and that's why we have Mike Huckabee there as ambassador, you know, stunning zealot of Israel. Marco Rubio, another Israel first, you know, foot soldier. We had Mike Waltz for a while, same thing. Even RFK and Tulsi Gabbard are very pro-Israel in general. That did seem to be the primary litmus test to even get into this cabinet, by the way.
Irrespective of the public opinion, and, you know, he's not running for president again. What does he care now, you they'll get over it. You know, people will be cool in a couple of years, and maybe we even will fall back in love with him for some other reason. Not impossible.
Yeah, that's impossible. I'm just going to say, in my case at least, that's impossible. We ain't fallen in love with them if we ever were in the first place, which I wasn't. I'm not gloating. I'm just saying not all of us will be spellbound by Trump ever again unless, you know, he shuts down the Fed tomorrow or something like that.
I don't know. He would have to just be like, I'm canceling federal taxes.
Federal income tax, but that's exactly.
And I think I'd still be angry about the Epstein thing.
We'd still be angry, but if he did cancel federal income
like,
tax...
going back. No, give us the Epstein files, but like
he's got some levers left to pull.
He's gonna have to cancel.
He's got some levers left that he can pull that might just.
It's the only one I could think of off the top of my head that I'd be like, maybe
if he really did lock her up.
Maybe if he but I don't even care about it anymore.
No,
because they're corrupt both sides now. It's just everybody can go to prison. I genuinely don't care.
He was right, by the way.
Lock up Hillary Clinton when like Netanyahu, you're like dapping up Netanyahu doesn't really do anything for me anymore.
No, nobody cares.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm chuckling, but she's right. Hey, if he shuts down the income tax extortion apparatus, shuts down the IRS, and eliminates the income tax, hey, man, I'll be a lot more charitable to Trump. Maybe that could make me quasi fall in love with him. But even that, if he's covering up Epstein, there's something there. But hey, short of shutting down the IRS, I'll even take shutting down capital gains taxes. I'd be fine with that. But let's face it, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do anything substantial, despite the fact that this is one of the worst cover-ups, worst managed, worst propagandized, and worst messaged cover-ups in American history. I don't think a lot of his base that left him over this and a lot of the distance that, you know, held their nose and still pulled the lever for him in the voting booth are going to regain his trust ever after this. But that said, you know, where does he go from here? Does this jeopardize the rest of his agenda? I have to think it does to some extent, especially when it comes to any idea of, you know, mass deportations. I don't think people would be as forgivable about tariffs, especially if they remain in place and, you know, tank the S&P 500 something like 20% or something again, like happened. I don't know, it was around 15 or 20%, something like that, while they were in place before they got rescinded. You know, things like that are going to be harder for him to accomplish. And people can say, hey, you know, he doesn't have to worry about the electorate anymore. He won his second election. He can't become president again. And that's right. But his agenda still hinges upon some level of political popularity and retaining some elements of his cult of personality, which is a phenomenon he does enjoy. He enjoys a lot of support from, you know, the House and Senate, from the Israel lobby, from the military-industrial complex, obviously, too. Look at what he's doing in Ukraine, rearming Ukraine while all this is happening, that not that many people are talking about, but that's stunningly similar, by the way, to what Biden did for nearly 4 years, by the way. You know, more like 3, I guess. But that's where we're at. That's where we stand. This is a crossroads between people that want answers and people that are just fine and complacent, locked into the two-party uniparty, the two-party system that rules the world with Israel as its first prerogative always and forever. But that's where we're left with from the Epstein case, despite, you know, all the questions that linger. How did he really die? How did he get his wealth? Which intelligence services was he truly connected with and working for? Because we already know about the connections. I mean, people like Whitney Webb and Daryl Cooper have written a lot about the connections, Mike Benz and some others too. But what does that mean? Where's the smoking gun? I think the feds have the answers. I think they know the answers. They just can't divulge it to us, and that's what we're left with. But let me know down below, do you agree with Candace Owens and Milo about this? I actually didn't know about Milo's opinion on any of this, but, you know, how bad is the Epstein cover-up hurting him? Can Trump salvage the rest of his agenda despite this? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Candace also. She's awesome. Great segment here. Please consider joining as a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you do that, I really appreciate your support, and in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live on my channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.